Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and the facts in the WSL. I'm your host for today, Tom Maher, and today we're here for a season review of Chelsea. We're going to talk about how the Blues got on off the back of their treble-winning season last term. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by our producer to the stars, Sophie Hodson. How are you doing today, Sophie?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm excited to be back on the pod. This is my second time, but really enjoyed it last time. So looking forward to talking about Chelsea.
Fantastic. Yeah, the debut was so good. We had to get you back on as soon as possible. So I know that you're kind of a Chelsea fan as well. So I wanted to kind of ask you about your beginnings as a Chelsea fan. Like, how did you start to be a Chelsea fan?
Yeah, I basically got into it from 2018 in the FA Cup final. And I was into women's football a bit. I played it at school, but never really followed it. And my dad got tickets for the FA Cup final of Chelsea v Arsenal. And so we picked Chelsea to support the right team. And they won. They beat Arsenal 3-1, I think it was. And Fran Kirby and Ramona Bachmann scored. And that was when Jordan Nobbs and Beth Mead were kind of the face of Arsenal. And I honestly just fell in love with Chelsea. And then I think it was 2019 summer, then we got season tickets for the women. And we've been going to Kingsmeadow ever since, basically, the past 6 years following Chelsea.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's I really like Kingsmeadow. I know that they're not going to be going there as much next season, but it's a great stadium and it's proved. I mean, Chelsea have had some unbelievable results there. That's so nice, though. This is why I'm so excited about this FA Cup weekend as well, because there's so many love stories of football and women's football are born on the FA Cup final weekend, you know. So I've got a bit of a silly one to start off, Sophie. Going to ask you about how you feel Chelsea's season has gone, but could you explain to me, if you were to compare Chelsea's season to an ice cream, which would it be?
Well, I feel like I've got a bit of a boring answer for this, but I was just thinking basic vanilla because they've been good consistently. Like, vanilla's always good, but they've been underwhelming at times and nothing really special. So I feel like they've been kind of a bland vanilla ice cream, in my opinion.
I think that's a great answer. To be fair, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I think, yeah, because it hasn't, won the League Cup, which is obviously great, but also not what Chelsea are kind of used to as far as only winning the League Cup. So, yeah, you wouldn't say no to a vanilla ice cream, but if you had the option of like chocolate and all of these, then yeah, I'm with you. Fantastic. So, we'll start off by just talking about the summer before. So, throwing our minds back to before a ball was kicked this term. Sonia Wan-Pastor was obviously her second season in charge of Chelsea. And the transfers that came in the summer, Ellie Carpenter, Livia Peng, Alyssa Thompson, Mara Alba, and then, in January, no signings came in. Obviously, Sophie, hindsight is 2020, but how do you think those particular moves went?
Yeah, I think that specifically Ellie Carpenter and Alyssa Thompson have both been incredible signings. A lot of the time, players come in and you maybe see a few appearances initially in the season, and then they sort of kind of sit back when the competitive games start happening later on in the season, and the more common starters usually play. But I think with Ellie and Alyssa, they both obviously had quite a reputation coming into Chelsea. I think they've settled in really, really well, and they've brought definitely a bright spark. They're both players with a lot of speed behind them. So Ellie Carpenter has been a great asset in defence. I think she's worked really, really well with actually Villa Berman and Millie Bright when she has been playing this season, and Naomi Goma. I think she's just settled in well, and Alyssa Thompson's been so good, such a bright spark down the wings and turned up in big moments, which is what you want when a player joins your club. I feel like she's just fitted right in. She looks passionate when she plays for Chelsea. So, and obviously Livia Peng as well. When Hannah's not been there, she's stepped up, and I've not seen a disappointing performance from her. I think that she's done really well considering a club like Chelsea. Sometimes when you've got a keeper like Hannah Hampton consistently starting, you think oh, well, am I going to get minutes? But when she's had those minutes, she's looked ready for it, and I think that the Chelsea fans have trusted her. And there's been times where maybe Hannah's looked slightly exhausted, and the fans have sort of encouraged Livia Peng to come on and play as well. So there's that kind of trust, I feel like, this season between the new signings and the fans. And I feel like they maybe could have made a signing in January, especially with a weak attacking sense coming into the second half of the season with injuries. So, but the summer signings definitely a positive year, I think.
Agreed. I really like that point about turning up in big moments, because I think we saw Alyssa Thompson and Ellie Carpenter do that. You know, I think about Ellie Carpenter and her performance against Barcelona, and then in the opening game as well. I remember her being fantastic against City. And then Alyssa Thompson, seems like Alyssa Thompson was just scoring. I think she scored at the Emirates. You know, she scored in that game against Liverpool as well, just like out of nothing a lot of the time as well. Which is always what you want from those big signings. Yeah. And then last summer, the outgoings, you had Sophie Ingle, obviously a bit of a club legend, Ashley Lawrence, Sakira Musovic, Aniek Noen, Mia Fischel, Alejandra Bernabe, Miles Mpombe, Lucy Watson, Amy Claypole, and then, of course, in January, Gura Wrighton, Kat Macario, Oriane Jean-Francois, and Ashanti Akpan. Do you think that there's any... Do you think most of those players left at the right time? Are there any that kind of maybe you're thinking about now and thinking back on the season as well, we could have maybe done with them?
Yeah, I feel like it's a difficult one because you've kind of got to trust Sonia Bonpaster's vision. There's been such a notable shift in management, in senior leadership with Paul Green going, and older players. There's just been a big shift within Chelsea in the past couple of years. So I feel like a lot of players have known it's the right time, even though it's hard as fans. You kind of look at the younger players coming through from the academy and from abroad as well. Like, the talent is significantly rising. So as hard as it is to see players like that go, I feel like to progress, Chelsea have had to make those decisions. I do think that Ashley Lawrence, we potentially could have kept a bit longer. I thought she was really strong at the back. And when it comes into the second half of the season and players start getting injured, specifically in defence, we've had Natalie Bjorn out, we've had Lucy Bronze out, I believe, for a period of time. You can't consistently rely on Ellie Carpenter, and Villa Berman's just 20 years old. Naomi Gum is still settling in. So I think that Ashley Lawrence would have been a good player to keep for maybe a season longer. But it's difficult to know. We've had so many leave. Guro Wrighton was quite unexpected, and Katerina Macario as well scored in the FA Cup final just last year for us. So yeah, it's some interesting decisions, but I do think in the long-term plan, Chelsea are clearly building on this new idea, younger players coming through, and it's harder to see when they're getting less minutes. They're not going to want to stay at the club. So you've got to kind of have sympathy for the players, and the players that have left Chelsea are now doing really well at their other respective clubs. So I think it's hard from a fan's perspective, but definitely looks as if the right time, and it's a new era happening at Chelsea, which is exciting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with both of those. I think, you know, you see Ashley Lawrence playing in a Champions League final, starting in a Champions League final, but then by the same token, I suppose, you know, Chelsea probably wouldn't have got Ellie Carpenter without Ashley Lawrence going the other way. So you probably would take that as a deal. And then, you know, you're kind of looking at the other players like Kat Macario. And even though Kat Macario might have a really big future in women's football, I suppose, like, I don't think she's played much at all for San Diego Wave. And so to actually get a fee for her in January is quite good business from Chelsea. If you knew she was going to go anyway in the summer, then yeah, to get recoup a little bit of money. And then I don't think she would have actually been back anyway to have any feature in the season. So yeah, I completely agree with you on those ones. With all of that in mind, you know, when you're looking at what all of that having happened before the season started, where were your expectations? What did you kind of think was going to happen? Obviously, it's an interesting one given Chelsea's incredible season the season before. But where were your kind of expectations at?
Yeah, I feel like it was pretty hard to know going into this season what was going to happen because we won the treble last year. However, the performances, well, we went unbeaten, but you can see as women's football has grown, you're losing those higher score lines. And there were some matches that Chelsea pushed through, and there was definitely some outsider comments from fans and neutral fans in general, kind of seeing Chelsea not being that same dominant side. However, they pull through and they win the games that they need to. But I think going into this season, I wasn't quite sure what to expect because second year in charge with new management and lots of other teams had great signings in the transfer window. Arsenal bringing in the likes of Olivia Smith, and obviously London City Lionesses had some very promising signings. And City would definitely be hungry for the WSL, having not been in the Champions League. So I wasn't quite sure how we would face up against these new challenges, new opponents, a lot of players leaving as well. But I think it's been a good season overall, but for Chelsea standards, they would definitely have wanted more to come out of it with the talent that they've got and the reputation that they have in the women's game. But I think I would have expected specifically a bit more of an attacking presence when I know we didn't know that Myra Ramirez was going to get injured so early on, and Sam Kerr was just coming back from her ACL. But Myra's played such a minimal amount of minutes. I think it was literally the last game of the season where she came on. Sam Kerr has just come back from ACL, and Aggie Beaver Jones has had lots of spells out with injury. So I would have expected a bit more of a prolificness up front. I feel like they've been quite underwhelming this season. I've seen a lot of Soja Nuskin up front, and LJ's sort of had to adopt that number 9 position at times. So that's been a bit disappointing. So I guess I would have maybe expected a bit more of Chelsea to be slightly more of an attacking threat, and I think that's where they've missed out this season. But especially now there was rumours of signing Bunny Shaw and Sam Kerr leaving, it will be interesting. They'll need to sign someone this summer, so we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, I think that part of the season was really interesting when Sonny Bonpassa was trying to play LJ at the kind of in the 9. Do you think there's a future for her there, or do you rather see her out on the wing or outside the box in attacking midfield kind of positions?
Well, I mean, she can play anywhere. So if she's putting in the goals, I'm happy for her to play number 9. But I think she's such a quality player, and the ball is literally magnetic to her foot. So wherever she is, I think you kind of have to. When you've got players like that, you have to use their creativity on the ball as much as you can all over the field. And she's so good with crosses into the box, tracking back to defend. So when we need her up front, definitely a player that you can rely on. But I personally enjoy seeing her play in more open positions when she has the freedom to run around the pitch. I think that's when you see the best of her. When she looks creative, she's able to beat players and create opportunities. And at times, when you limit her to just the number 9, I feel like you won't necessarily get the best out of her. But she's such a quality player. I mean, I'm happy with her anywhere on the field.
I absolutely agree with that. I think, yeah, because that's part of the joy of watching her, isn't it? The way she just drifts past these players who you haven't seen beaten all season, and she's just like, it's like, yeah. So I agree. Okay, so let's kind of talk about how the season did pan out then. So obviously, the WSL, it was 15 wins for Chelsea, 4 draws and 3 losses. The goals scored 44 goals. That was the third most in the league. 20 goals against. That was the third least in the league. Finished 6 points behind Manchester City, 2 behind Arsenal, and 9 ahead of Manchester United. Their 49-point tally, that was the least they've ever had in a full WSL, 12-team WSL campaign. So that was a little bit disappointing, but even that kind of goes towards how incredible Chelsea have been in the years gone by. Obviously, they'd won the league for the past 6 years, but this time they didn't just fail to win the league; they finished outside the automatic Champions League qualification. It's not as bad as it is on other years, and obviously, I think England now have one less round as well to go through, so they don't have to go through that little mini tournament anymore. So it's not as bad as it has been in last year's, especially when you have like a major tournament as well. And defeats to Arsenal and City were the first time Chelsea suffered back-to-back league defeats in over a decade. It was 11 points less than last season and 19 goal difference less, kind of what you were touching on there earlier, Sophie. The top scorer was Alyssa Thompson and Sam Kerr, both on 7 goals. LJ was the next most with 5, and then Aggie Beever-Jones with 4, who scored all 4 of those in the first 4 games of the season, which was, I really thought she was going to kick on, and obviously she had injuries as well, but would have been nice to see her get a few more. LJ had the most assists in the Chelsea side in the WSL with 4, closely followed by Alyssa Thompson and Vika Kaptein on 3. Chelsea went out of the FA Cup in the semi-final stage after 3-2 defeat to Manchester City at home. Chelsea's probably one of their big highlights of the season was beating Manchester United in the Subway Cup final at Ashton Gate 2-0. They also made the quarterfinals of the Champions League after coming in the top 4 in the league phase. So the question here that's written down in all these season previews is, did they do better or worse than we all expected? And I think it's quite obvious we all expected them to do better, but that is kind of more a symptom of how good Chelsea have been, I would say, rather than their season being bad. I mean, I think any team in the league, maybe except Arsenal and City, this is like a fantastic season to do this, to do what they've done. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But we'll go to the good first. Sophie, what was your highlight of the season for Chelsea?
I think that the highlight has to be winning the League Cup. I mean, obviously it's not the Champions League, which they would have really wanted this year and the past few years, but to get that far and win that competition, it's obviously another trophy for the cabinet. So the club will definitely be happy with that one. And I thought it was a good win. We looked confident, and yeah, I think that was definitely would be my highlight of the season for Chelsea.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think there's a tendency to kind of think of the League Cup as this trophy that's kind of obviously lesser than the other 3, and that's fair enough. But I don't think it's any, especially with some of these bigger competitions, it's really difficult to win, especially the route that Chelsea had for this competition. You know, to beat City in the semi-finals away from home was exceptionally impressive, and then they really were dominant against United in that final as well. It wasn't a lucky victory. They fully deserved to win that game, and that to get Aggie Beever-Jones on the score sheet as well was a particularly nice moment. I think, yeah, and then obviously it's kind of the tale of Chelsea's season that would be the highlight, but there's still some lowlights even in that game where Bjorn comes on and has to come off and then is out for the rest of the season. So it's really tricky. I suppose some of the other highlights would have been the draw to Barcelona, victory on the first day against Manchester City. LJ's goal against Arsenal at the Emirates was something special, and Alyssa Thompson's the same. I think if there was a Emirates goal this season, I think there'd be some Chelsea names right at the top of it. I think, I suppose what was kind of the low point of the season? I think we might know the answer to this, Sophie, but talk us through. I hope this is like therapy for you, but talk us through the lowest point of the season.
The lowest point of this season was definitely losing to Arsenal in the Champions League. That was it was horror for a Chelsea fan. I think in the competition that we've come to the semi-finals the past 3 years, I think, against Barcelona and then we actually reached the final in 2021 and played Barca in the final. So to then go out this year against Arsenal, it was just a painful loss for sure, especially when you look at the VAR decisions and that. I think they were controversial, but there's some that could have gone either way. So I don't know, but it was definitely a tough 2 games coming so close. It wasn't like Arsenal were entirely dominant. I actually thought Chelsea looked up for it a lot of both games actually, and they just weren't prolific or clinical in front of goal at all. Sam Kerr missed so many chances in the second leg at Stamford Bridge, and it was just painful to watch. Chelsea can score so many goals against other teams, and then when it comes to the Champions League, we just forget how to score. So that would have, I think, definitely tough the players as well, especially because in previous years we've beaten Arsenal in the WSL, and Arsenal actually beat us at Stamford Bridge this year, a couple months or the month before. So yeah, both games were sort of too different, but I think yeah, that was definitely a low. And then losing to City in the FA Cup as well was painful, especially going from a winning position to then a deficit and then obviously going out. So that is hard to take. It's very unlike Chelsea to be above on the score sheet and then lose the game. So definitely those were two low points of the season. I think the WSL was less hard to take, having won it the past 6 years, and it never was a big, oh, losing it at the end of the season. There was a less consistent feeling throughout the season. So that was understandable, but the Champions League and the FA Cup were definitely ones that they would have wanted to win, and to go out to Arsenal is definitely tough.
Yeah, it's kind of the hope that kills you, isn't it? Because, like as you said, in the league, it was done and dusted. City had won it really quite relatively early, as much as it wasn't confirmed. They were the best team in the league this year, but then in that Champions League game, I think you could make a very compelling argument to say that Chelsea were the better side over two legs, and because of everything that happened in those eventful. I mean, for the neutral, it was one of the best Champions League ties you'd ever seen. But everything that happened to those two legs, you kind of forget how close Chelsea were to kind of just go in a couple of goals up at the Emirates as well. Those really good chances early doors, and then in the second leg as well, it was just Arsenal just absolutely clinging on desperately, and Daphne van Domselaar having to make some absolutely incredible saves. Certainly was a great advert for English football. It was a fantastic tie. And then that City game as well is the same thing, as that, Chelsea were the better side for probably 80 minutes of that game, and somehow it's kind of fallen apart. And even though that's more frustrating, hopefully that is kind of an indication that, it's not too far off bringing things together, and that, it's not like Chelsea being outclassed by these teams over and over again. Obviously, the defeat to Manchester City in the league was a little bit, but it's good that those type of results are going to happen, especially when it looked like a team that wasn't full of much confidence as well after losing to Arsenal in the league. And the fixture list wasn't helping at all, to be fair, giving those fixtures back to back. And another thing I think that really, really did kind of impact Chelsea's season was just the amount of injuries that Chelsea had, which was a lot more than they've had to deal with in previous seasons. And I don't think any team in the league had to deal with as many injuries as Chelsea did this term. They had significant absentees. I think only Cuthbert and Baltimore played 21 WSL games, and obviously no player featured in all 22 games. Major, you kind of touched on this earlier, Sophie, but the major players who were on the sidelines for extended periods of time: Kadisha Buchanan, Mayra Ramirez, Natalie Bjorn, Lucy Bronze, Neve Charles, Katrina Macario, Aggie Beaver-Jones, Vika Kaptein, Millie Bright, LJ, Hannah Hampton, Sam Kerr. Those are, you could make a WSL winning side out of those. You've already had a WSL winning side basically out of those players, so that is something that really affected them in the season. I suppose, how much would you put down those injuries as the reason to Chelsea's maybe underperformance in comparison to other years?
Yeah, definitely. The list there has got some great players in. So I think the injuries definitely impacted the team's performance over the season, when you're constantly got players in all positions over the field, especially when some have been there a couple of years, some have only just joined. It brings a sense of disconnection, and some players won't have that same trust in who they're passing the ball to, who's going to be on the end of the cross. So I think that definitely showed up front this season. Defense as well, we didn't sort of have a go-to consistent back line. We varied our fullbacks quite a bit and centre backs as well a lot, and Lucy Bronze kind of shifting between the positions. So injuries definitely played a part, and you could see at times where in games when you're playing against stronger sides like Manchester City, where they exploited our absences and there were gaps in the midfield. I think we struggled in the midfield slightly this year. We looked sort of weak. So yeah, it definitely had an impact, but we still had really good quality players on the pitch that we still could have put chances away. So Chelsea will look back and realise all the players that they missed out on and what could have been different, but equally they've got such a great selection on field that could have been better at times. But yeah, it's definitely difficult when you've got new players settling in and there's no sort of consistent starting lineup, and the fans are unaware at times of who's on the bench, who's starting, who's not even available. And yeah, that was definitely tough in the Champions League. I think it hit us in the second end of the season. Players started to drop, and our bench in the League Cup final, our bench was so weak. There was academy players for the majority of the bench. So yeah, it definitely played an impact, but I think Chelsea did well to do how they did with that many injuries.
Yeah, for sure. I think it kind of was well summed up by the training ground footage with was it like 6 or 7 Chelsea players training before. I think it was one of the legs against Arsenal. Just that kind of summed it all up really. But obviously, another part of it was the points being dropped that just weren't dropped last year. Von Paster's win percentage was 68%, down from 86 from last season, which obviously is a big drop off. And Sophie, you mentioned earlier about Paul Green leaving. That was a really controversial moment in Chelsea's season, and that kind of added to the spotlight on Chelsea in an unhelpful way. And obviously, it wasn't really clear, and it came at an awkward time because I think it wasn't long after Chelsea had lost 5-1 to City, and then Sonia Bonpastor had been given. She kind of gave that ultimatum. I think she said, "If people think I'm not the right person to stay for this job at the club, I'll be happy to go, but I'll never give up." Which was a pretty iconic moment in the season. But and they obviously did. They wanted to keep her. They extended her contract, and then Paul Green left shortly after. It didn't feel like there was any bad feeling between Paul Green or Sonia Bonpastor. It felt like it was kind of more to do with his position at the club, the way that the higher ups in the club were dealing with him. I know that the players seemed to be quite dismayed, especially by the way that Paul Green was dismissed from his role. Obviously, they've now got former FC Nordjylland director of football Phil Radley as the new women's sporting director. Obviously, with Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart now moving over from the men's team, it was a pretty unceremonious start, especially with what Paul Green had done for the club. How did you kind of take that? Because it felt like that was another moment where maybe there was a disconnect, not just between the players and the hierarchy, but also between the fans and the hierarchy at Chelsea.
Yeah, I feel like Paul Green's his stepping down was definitely a shock to the fans. And when we've had players gradually retiring and leaving and Emma Hayes moving on, it's tough to take more of those things, and the fans are slowly kind of accepting this new era. So it did come at a tough time in the season with some big games ahead and maybe some unexpected players leaving and some tough losses. You mentioned the 5-1 loss to City. So definitely a sense of uncertainty with the fans, and Paul Green's been there for such a long time and worked closely with Emma Hayes and some club legends. Obviously, I feel like bringing in Erin Cuthbert, they had a strong relationship, and lots of the players shared their feelings about the situation on Instagram. And I think it just shows how important and crucial Paul Green was to this Chelsea women's side. So for then the club to kind of let him go or him leave, it makes you question what's gone wrong. If nothing's really, Chelsea haven't had a drastic downfall. They've stayed consistent. They've just won their 6th consecutive league. So it does make you kind of think, well, what's going on behind the scenes then, what's happening when players are starting to leave. But I think fans can understand it's a new era, new players coming in. So, yeah, it was definitely hard to take, but you can kind of understand he's been there for a long time and he's seen players move on and management changes. So, yeah, it was a lot of not outrage from fans, but sort of confusion. And I think the players probably felt the same, which is another thing to factor into their season. But Chelsea are such a good club with lots of support, so I'm sure that it's all been sorted out. But yeah, definitely a tough thing to take.
Yeah, for sure. When it was researching for this episode, you kind of realised just how much happened in Chelsea's season. It was a really eventful one. So kind of looking more into detail about Chelsea's season and just kind of their strengths, I suppose, like their possessional style seemed to be, or possession style football seemed to be a lot kind of more melded in this term. I think they had the most possession on average per match of any team, so including your Arsenals and Manchester Cities, who more traditionally would kind of go down that possessional route. They had 59.9% possession on average in the WSL this season. They also had the second most accurate passes and the most accurate long balls per match. But I do think that Millie Bright raises that quite significantly. I think she played an average of 5.5 accurate long balls per match, which is almost double the next most in the league. Also had the joint most corners. I do think on the whole, the statistics seem to suggest that they were the third best team in the league overall. Just in comparison to last season, their drop-off, they scored half a goal less per match, had 4 less clean sheets, 10 less big chances created. And those incremental drop-offs kind of hit them and hurt them, I think, more than anything else, really. Hannah Hampton had the second highest save percentage of any goalkeeper in the league with 74.6, just 0.1 behind Chiamaka Ndozi. She also won the Golden Glove, had the joint most clean sheets. Lucy Bronze had the most interceptions per 90, and of course there was really big moments of like Erin Cuthbert getting her 300 appearances for Chelsea and Sam Kerr equaling Chelsea women's all-time record goal scoring tally. I'm going to start off with a potentially tricky one. It doesn't necessarily have to be a player, this. It can be, head coach or something about the team. But what was kind of the most disappointing aspect of the season for you, Sophie, do you think?
Yeah, I think as a fan, what was definitely frustrating this year, I kind of touched on it earlier, but up front, we just looked unsure, inconsistent. Alyssa Thompson was producing such great crosses into the box and nobody was really there on the end of it. Sam Kerr's she's been great since her ACL injury. She's still incredibly talented, but I think you can sort of see there's a slight decline on reaching for that extra ball, that extra stride, and we sort of lacked that bit of precision in front of goal, and up front we were just looking weak, especially with Aggie and Myra being not there all the time as well. So that was sort of disappointing, and then not getting anyone in the January window as well. It was tough when you're then playing against teams with such great defences and also great attackings in European football and in the league. You're not going to be able to break through their defence the way we've done in previous years. You kind of need those strong players up front. Arsenal have got Alessia Russo and City have Bunny Shaw, but Chelsea didn't really have that clinical up-front presence this year. Sam Kerr obviously is still really good, but she's not got that same feeding in a way and connection that she's had with the likes of Fran Kirby in previous years. It's a new era, and I think we're starting to see changes all over the field in that. And so, yeah, up front was definitely frustrating this year. I think the midfield, we'd receive it with Erin Cuthbert and Lauren James and then look a bit panicked. And Ellie Carpenter actually worked really well in that sense. As a fullback, she would do some great runs down the wing, and that's actually where I think we found a lot of success from our fullbacks and Baltimore and Niamh Charles in the second half of the season. So Chelsea have done well to adapt with their injuries and use their fullbacks, but Yeah, I'd say in the final third it's been tough. Those connections have not really been there this season. So in the summer, I reckon Chelsea will probably look to tackle that area of the field, because when the oppositions are getting better and better, you can't rely on some moments of skill up front. So yeah, it will definitely be interesting. But I think that's where we really lacked this year, especially in those big games when you really need to put the ball in the back of the net. That was it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That really did seem to be the main issue, and I think even Sam Kerr, as good as she was, and she certainly I think had a decent season. I think it was just still a player who's coming back from her ACL injury. I think she kind of looked probably the best that she'd looked all season in the last kind of couple of games, last few games. But yeah, it just didn't quite work for Chelsea up top this season. Surprise package. Who's the kind of player that surprised you in a positive way?
I'd say definitely Villa Berman, because if I'm honest, I didn't know much about her before coming to Chelsea. I knew that she was very popular in the Netherlands, but especially because she didn't, from her initial signing, then come straight into the squad. I believe she went back on loan last year. So it's it's been exciting seeing her break into the squad. She came on in one of the early games of the season, and then Von Persie kept giving her more and more appearances, and then she obviously got her FA Cup goal, which was so good against Spurs, and then assisting Sam Kerr, I think, in a game before in the FA Cup against Manchester United. So she's definitely settled in, and for a player so young, it looks like she's been there for ages. She's calm on the ball, she's composed, she's already started building those connections on the field, and then coming in and out of international camp, I think she scored her first international goal this year as well. So it definitely looks like she's starting to come out of her shell and find some confidence. And it's really exciting seeing the young Dutch player just sort of find her way in Chelsea and make a name for herself. I think she's been really good in times where we've needed a bit of creativity. Like, she's been strong at the back, but obviously we've had our centre backs to cover behind, which I think has given her a bit of an opportunity to go up when she needs to. And she's quite good on the ball, keeping the ball close to her feet, and she knows where the players are. So I feel like as a fan, the fans would feel really comfortable with her on the ball. When she first started coming on at Kings Meadow, it was really enjoyable to see her sort of fit in. So she would definitely be my surprise for the season.
I love that. I think, yeah, she's one of those prize assets, like a left-sided centre back. They're just so sought after at the moment. Like, I'm just thinking about Arsenal and playing Steph Catley at centre back, because trying to get a left-footed centre back, and then obviously they tried to play McCabe there as well this season. As well. So to have an out-and-out, extremely talented young centre back is like just priceless. Yeah, and I completely agree. What a fantastic season she had. I remember speaking to Daphne van Domselaar a while back, and I asked her who's like a Dutch player that we should all be watching right now, and she said Werle Berman is incredible. And well, she was spot on. Fair play. I had not heard of her before Daphne van Domselaar said that, but yeah, and I'm guessing you might also, Werle might also get your next award. So I'm going to go best young player of the season, Sophie.
I was going to say Berman as well. She just won the WSL, I think, Rising Star Award. So, yeah, she's definitely been a standout, really good. But I was also thinking Chloe Sarwi, who's, I think she's only 17. She's been really good. When I was watching at Kings Meadow, when she first came on sometime late at the before Christmas, and she settled in so well, and we were all so impressed. She came on for Baltimore, and she was doing slide tackles and looked so confident, and then getting a call up to England under 23s at just 17. I think Chelsea should be really protective of her and keep her while she's still young, got so much potential, and I'm no doubt other clubs will be looking at her and seeing how she's getting on. So she's, yeah, made her Champions League debut, another player along with Berman, who I think will be really valuable to Chelsea's backline in the future.
Yeah, she seems a fantastic player, doesn't she? I remember after the Subway League Cup final, Sonia Bonpastor was kind of talking about the underage groups in England and how she didn't feel that a lot of the Chelsea, like at Lyon, she felt like she could move those youngsters up into the first team quite easily. But at Chelsea, it was harder to do that. And that's kind of indicative of the English system. And she said that probably the only one at the moment who's at the level of the first team is Chloe Sawi. So that is like big compliment to be receiving from a manager like Sonia Bonpastor. She obviously thinks a huge amount of Chloe Sawi, and yeah, it's easy to see why for sure. And then player of the season for Chelsea, who would be your player of the season?
That's a tough one because I feel like I'd have different players of the season for the first half and second half. I'd say Alyssa Thompson has kind of overall been, yeah, I think she's been great signing. And yeah, she's just been that bright spark that Chelsea have really needed, scoring in the London derby against Arsenal at the Emirates. And I think she scored a couple goals against Liverpool as well that were good. And she's just so rapid on the ball, causing defenders constant issues. So she's been a player that we've definitely been able to rely on, and she's been consistent, I think, which definitely stands her out as a good player. And then I would say Lauren James for the second half of the season because she's just coming out of an injury. She's featured in so many games this second half of the season quite recently, and she's looked so confident on the ball, scored some amazing goals, and yeah, she's really made the pitch her own in the second half of the season. So I'd say those two were my standout, but I feel like there's not necessarily been someone who's been really great for us. All of our players have contributed in their different ways, but Alyssa Thompson and Lauren James, I think, have been more consistent when they've been playing on the field and providing assists and goals.
Yeah, for sure. I think the season wouldn't have been vanilla if Lauren James was fit the whole season, for sure. She is just, yeah, one of the most exciting players. I think I can't remember seeing a more exciting player. She's just, yeah, it's just magic with the ball at her feet, really. And so the next question is kind of, are there any players that you would put in the WSL team this season? Obviously, the official team of the season had Hampton and Thompson in the team of the season. Would you agree with that? Would you put anyone else in, or any shouts of players that missed out?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they're both players that should definitely be in there. And I was kind of looking at the other positions, and there's nobody really that I would particularly change. I do think at some point, maybe potentially last season, Erin Cuthbert deserves her flowers. She's, from a Chelsea perspective, I know she's so valued by the fans, and she consistently shows up. And I'm a big fan of how she just throws herself on the line, and she really is, I personally think, in the past couple of years been our best player. So I wouldn't maybe this year have put her in the team of the season. Looking at some other midfielders in the league, Hasagawa's obviously been great. So it's tough to make those decisions, but I do think that Erin Cuthbert should get some kind of recognition for all the work that she does. And she's played with so many midfielders for Chelsea, with Kira Walsh, and she's constantly varying her different positions, and she's somebody that you can rely on. But I think they've made good decisions with Alyssa Thompson and Hannah Hampton this year. Yeah.
Agreed. I like that you bring up Erin Cuthbert. I think she was in my team this season last year as well. I just thought she was so good, and she's just one of those players that makes everyone else look better, I think, like when she's on the pitch, and then that kind of obviously takes the shine off her own individual performance, but at times. But yeah, she's just a fantastic player, and I think a really underrated dead ball delivery. I feel like her and Millie Bright was so good over the years with those kind of cross in and headers in, and I think that'll be something that we missed. So the other Chelsea centre backs or potential new striker will need to be picking up on a few of those balls. Okay, so we'll kind of look forward to the summer and next season now. Obviously, let's talk the outgoings first. Millie Bright's retired, Sam Kerr, Gura Wrighton, massive players for Chelsea over the last few years. Overall, how do you feel about those players exiting, and how will that affect the team? in the future? And was it time for all of them to go, or did you feel like maybe you'd want to keep hold of one or two? Or
Yeah, it's definitely signifying the end of an era and the start of a new one. I personally didn't think, and a lot of fans I think agreed that they would all go at the same time. But when you've got Guro Reiten going first, then Millie Bright retiring, it does sort of play in the players' minds, thinking, oh well, with more and more players going, is this the right time? And then that positions all over the field will be taken into account and shifting around, and maybe players that you worked well on the field are then not there anymore. So it all kind of plays into your decisions. So behind the scenes, there was definitely a lot of talks that we wouldn't have heard. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard from a fan's perspective to understand why they're all going. And in those big games, you really need that kind of experience. And they maybe could have had another year in them, but they can probably see all the young talent coming through. And unfortunately, in the WSL, where it's just getting increasingly so much more talent, it's harder to remain at the top level. And when it's a club like Chelsea that are so ambitious, Millie Bright's our captain and she's been there for so many years, but unfortunately, you can't stay there forever. And there's, as we were just talking about, the young talent. So yeah, it's definitely hard from a fan's perspective, but with more and more going, I think it's sort of better that they go out together so then they can fully embrace this new era and bring in new players. But you do also think, would it have been better to sort of integrate a bit more and keep some of the experience for going into the next season? But yeah, with Sam Kerr, whenever it was a couple of years ago, she only signed a short contract. So I think that was more expected, Sam Kerr. And for Millie Bright to retire at the club makes definite sense, especially having already retired internationally. But yeah, I think it makes sense, but it is difficult when there's been so much happening and management changes, this new era. It is kind of worrying to see how Chelsea are gonna balance it. But you've got to give it time and just trust Sonia, I think.
yeah, and it's hard. I mean, you look at the players that Sonia Bonpastor has brought in already. Sandy Baltimore has been an excellent signing. Ellie Carpenter, of course, and so Verla Berman, I think, came in under her as well. So you've got. It's not like she's not able to find these talents or procure these talents. I suppose how much Paul Green's absence is going to play into that, who knows? I think you touched on Sam Kerr there. Obviously, Chelsea are heavily linked with Felicia Schroeder, who obviously scored a hat-trick for BK Häcken in the Europa Cup final. She's been phenomenal the last couple of years for her club side, and forcing a call up to the Sweden side. She'd be a great sign, and maybe some of that prolific kind of missing piece. What are the positions that Chelsea need to kind of sign a new player in? And do you have anyone? Is there anyone on your wish list at the moment?
I'm not really sure. I think we've got in our back line, I feel like there's not any real positions that we need to worry about too much this summer anyway. Maybe next January, but fullbacks we're definitely pretty stacked with Ellie Carpenter, Berman, Neve Charles, although she is linked to Real Madrid. So centre backs, and obviously Lucy Bronze if she stays, and then centre backs I think pretty good. Midfield I would maybe say somebody else for a bit more creativity, and I feel like that's where we sort of towards the end of the season needed somebody else in there to create more opportunities, a bit more creativity. There was at times Nuskin looked slightly disconnected maybe with Kira Walsh, or they just still need time to understand each other's play. But so maybe somebody in the midfield. I think defence isn't a primary area of recruitment at the moment. Keeper's good, but yeah, maybe up front and midfield, a couple really talented players that are not maybe at a younger age and that are like ready and at their best now, that Chelsea can rely on in the bigger games next season. So there's not many big strikers on the market at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see, but they'll definitely need to pick someone to keep up with their game and how everything is progressing at the moment with so many other big signings in for other clubs. So yeah, I'm not too sure who. Obviously Alexia Putellas, but I don't think they would ever get her. But she's now out and about, so I would be happy with her at Chelsea, but I can't see her coming.
Yeah, I mean, she would kind of suit that Chelsea style. I mean, just her kind of swashbuckling attack and play. Yeah, I like that. I think, yeah, the thing with Chelsea is that, you know, it's such a draw to play for Chelsea as well. All the success that they've had. And, you know, obviously playing all their home games at Stamford Bridge as well is kind of a massive draw now too. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting next season and how they do it this summer as well, who they might sign. Obviously, the whole Bunny Shaw situation is a bit disappointing, but it seems like City must have come in with a very big offer to persuade her, because it seemed for a long time like she was going to come to Chelsea. Obviously, any team would want Bunny Shaw, but you know, it's a little bit of a disappointing one there. What are kind of your expectations for next year, Sophie? Now, obviously, I know it's hard before any transfers really have taken place, but what would a good season look like next season?
I think a good season for Chelsea and their standards would be regaining that confidence all over the pitch to go out against whoever they're facing and bag a multitude of goals, not sort of getting over the line with one or two that we've seen a lot this season, which has definitely been one of our games at Kingsmeadow was 4-3 in about half an hour against Aston Villa. And that's definitely been, I keep saying defo, that's definitely been the difference, I can't still say, in this year. But yeah, I don't know. I think that will, yeah, they just need that confident edge to like constantly produce lots of goals, clinical in all positions, and regain that sort of Chelsea reputation that they're a scary team and a threat to Arsenal, Manchester City, and especially now that they're playing at Stamford Bridge, they really need to rise to that occasion, and they'll want to win titles there. And obviously the main target is the Champions League, as it has been for the past few years. But as Sonia's time there continues, it will definitely be more pressure to win that. So yeah, ideally I think sign a couple talented players up front or in the midfield that will really get us over the line next year, and work pre-season with these new young players that have been settling in this year, and really create a team where you've got a trusting starting lineup with the fans, and then great players on the bench that you can bring in, that they can go and face European sides and kind of regain that Chelsea dominance that they have, and go for the big titles next year. That would be ideal, I think.
Nice, I like that. Yeah, get that fear factor back, because Chelsea have been such a scary team for so long. I'm sure that'll be top of Sonia Von Pastel's wish list as well for next season. I'll just quickly tease, we've got some recommended recruits episodes coming to the YouTube channel. So one of them will be Chelsea, so make sure to subscribe and have a look on there. Sophie, thank you so much for talking Chelsea with me today. It was an absolute pleasure. So if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow at Decoding the WSL on Instagram. And thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.